When the Yidden were about to enter the land of Eretz Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu, it says, Hayil Moshe Be'eretz HaTorah Azes. Moshe Rabbeinu translated the Torah, and our sages tell us that he translated into 70 languages. And not only did Moshe Rabbeinu translate the Torah into 70 languages, but he also commanded the Yidden that when they go over the Yarden and they enter the land of Israel, they should also translate the Torah into 70 languages. Now there's a story that's brought down in Masechas Ephraim that says there was a king, his name was Talmai HaMelech. He lived in Egypt and he wanted that the Jewish sages should translate the Torah for him. So what he did was he put the sages in various rooms and gave them the instruction that they should translate the Torah. Now the sages commented about that day of them translating the Torah for Talmai HaMelech that it was a day that was hard, kasha, similar to the day when the Yidden made the Chet HaEgel. So the reason is because the Torah could not be translated for Talmai HaMelech to its complete precision, to complete accuracy of the way it's written in the Torah. So let's understand, why is this day comparable to the day that the Egel was made? And furthermore, what does it mean that the sages said that the Torah cannot be accurately translated for Talmai HaMelech? We know that Moshe Rabbeinu already translated into 70 languages, and in fact, the Lashon of Yavanis, which was the Greek language they wanted it to be translated into too, was already translated into Yavanis. And we find that there's an opinion that says that Yavanis is actually the best language and would have a higher level of sanctity if the Torah was translated into that. That's Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, and also the Gemara Yerushalmi says that that's the only language it can be translated into. So what was so difficult about the sages translating the Torah into Yavanis that the sages made it comparable to the day that the Egel was made? We find a similar expression about to the day the Egel was made in Gemara, where it talks about Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. We know that halachically, when there is a disagreement between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, we follow the halacha of Beis Hillel. And the Gemara tells us a story of one certain episode where Beis Hillel was bent over and sitting in front of Beis Shammai like one of the Talmidim. And Rashi says, even though Beis Hillel was the Nasi, was the leader of the Jewish people, and the halacha should be like him and not like the Av Beis Din, like Beis Shammai. Nevertheless, that day, the halacha followed Beis Shammai, and Beis Hillel was bent over like one of the Talmidim quietly, and the halacha didn't follow over him. So Rashi says Rashi explains what the Gemara says, that day was hard, similar to the day that the Egel was made. It was hard because Beis Hillel was the leader and he was a humble individual, and the halacha didn't follow like him. So similarly over here, we need to understand why the sages expressed that day as being in nature similar to the day that the Egel was made. So let's understand, what does it mean the day the Egel was made? It doesn't say that these two stories of the Jewish sages translating the Torah for Talmai HaMelech, or the story of Beis Hillel sitting in front of Beis Shammai bent over, it doesn't say it's comparable to the making of to the serving of the Egel, but it says it's comparable to the day the Egel was made. So if we find by the Mefarshim that they take various approaches and on various levels on how the Yidden were able to come to serve Avodah Zarah, come to serve the Chet Egel right after receiving the Torah from Hashem. So one approach that's brought down in Chassidus is that the Yidden, after they left Mitzrayim and after they received the Torah, initially they didn't want to replace Hashem. They wanted to replace Moshe Rabbeinu. And in fact, they were following Hashem's lead. Hashem set up a system that there was a leader of the Jewish people, and he was the intermediary, but the one that connects, the Memutza Mechaber. He was the one who gave them the ability that they can understand and relate to godliness on their own level, through their own intellect, through having a proper understanding and not just believing, which can sometimes be superficial, but to have a real connection with Hashem. And that came through Moshe Rabbeinu, through the leader who was directing them and giving them all the instructions from Hashem. So now that Moshe Rabbeinu went up to the mountain after the receiving of the Torah by the Yidden, and he was concealed, so the Yidden, they wanted to replace Moshe Rabbeinu. They wanted to have someone, a leader, the ability that can give them the way to serve Hashem in a way that they understand it and they feel it. So that was their initial idea. And in fact, it's brought down that when Hashem revealed himself to the Yidden by Matan Torah, it says there was a supernal chariot and it had various sides. And one of the sides, it says it had a pnei shar, which had the face of an ox. And the Yidden, it says Nishmat Ephraim, and they took from that and they had this idea that now that Moshe Rabbeinu is concealed and they need to have some sort of guidance in front of them, what they're going to do is they're going to take low elements and they're going to create this type of image which would be the guiding force in front of them. And in fact, we find after this episode that Hashem told the Yidden through Moshe Rabbeinu that they should actually make a mishkan, they should make a sanctuary, and they should take low elements, they should take the gold, the silver, and they should make it home for Hashem, where Hashem's presence will be revealed in the world. And we find that in the holiest of place there was the Kruvim, which brought out this idea of having a compass and having direction of where they need to go and how they need to behave. So the Yidden initially, they wanted to replace solely Moshe Rabbeinu, and that was their intention. Now what happened was, when they came to Aaron said, let's push it off for tomorrow. Ki chag l'Hashem machar. Tomorrow it's going to be a holiday for Hashem. Aaron's intention was that Moshe Rabbeinu would surely come back by the next day, and he would reveal in front of many of the Yidden, in front of everyone, how there's no validity to what the Yidden created, because it's something that's outside of Hashem, and it's something that Hashem didn't command them, and therefore they would come to a deeper appreciation of Einin Milvade. There's nothing besides for Hashem, and the only things in the world that can actually direct the Yidden or help them in their Avodas Hashem is when you have a clear directive from Hashem. The problem was that the Satan made them rise early the next morning, and with the multitude of peoples, etc., they came to actually serving the Chet Egel. So it turned into a very negative episode of them serving Avodah Zarah. But initially, the day that the Egel was made had the potential that it could have led to a deeper unity of Hashem being expressed in this world, and teaching the Yidden this deeper lesson of nothing in the world has any existence other than what Hashem gives it or what Hashem tells it to do. So that initially when they came to Aaron, that was the intention, that Aaron was pushing them off, that this deeper level of expression of Hashem's unity should be revealed in the world. The problem is it didn't come out by that. So when the sages tell us that the day was similar to the day that the Yidden made the Chet Egel, it's not so severe. It's more of a gray area. It's more of a day that has the potential to lead to negative consequences. And by the Chet Egel, it actually did lead to the negative consequences of them serving the idol. Now, going back to our story of the first one of the sages translating the Torah for Talmei HaMelech, the reason why the sages said that the day was hard and similar to the day of the making of the Egel is for this exact reason. When the sages were translating the Torah for Talmei HaMelech, it was on their own volition. It wasn't a commandment from Hashem, and therefore there was room and possibility that later on this translation can lead to an inaccuracy and to creating some sort of sense that there's actually places in the world or there's other driving forces that are not Hashem. Because we find that they had to change various verses. They didn't change the meaning of it, but they changed the order of the wording in order to bring out the idea that Hashem intended that should be conveyed. And therefore, the sages said that it was a difficult day when they translated the Torah because of the potential of them starting to maneuver the chronological order of the Torah. It can lead to negative consequences. And the same thing with Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai, it says in Chassidus that they come from the world of Gevura, which means severity. And they have a very strict approach. On the other hand, Beis Hillel comes from the world of Chesed, kindness. And therefore, we find that they have a lenient approach, which the way it expresses itself is Beis Shammai will negate the existence of the world. It's what Torah says, and there's no fusion of godliness into the world, and it's negating the existence of the world in the sense of complete severity, and therefore there's no way to bring down the godliness and elevate the actual world. It's bypassing it. On the other hand, we find by Beis Hillel, being that they come from a place of chesed, they're able to find in halacha a way that it works with the existence of the world, and it elevates the world and infuses it with godliness. So that day, when Beis Hillel was sit and bent before Beis Shammai, when the sages described that the day was similar in nature and it was hard as the day of the making of the Egel, is for the same reason. Because the halacha not following Beis Hillel gives room for this idea of it following Beis Shammai in a future generation, in a future time, and following Beis Shammai can lead subtly to this idea of something existing outside of Hashem and something that would be contrary to the divine intent. And therefore, it was a day similar in nature. It was gray, like the day that they made the Chet Egel, that could have led to negative consequences, which it actually did in the story of the Chet Egel. On a deeper level, it's not only about future, it leading it to something that would be a negative consequence, but even at the time itself, when you're involved in a gray area, meaning it's not complete holiness and it has the potential for leading to negative consequences, over there you're occupying yourself in a space that doesn't have clear holiness is also a day that's very hard. It's kasha because it doesn't have the actual holiness until later on it will be revealed how it comes about. So we can say that when it came to the Chet Egel, it actually led to the Avodah Zarah. But on the other hand, by these two stories, we find a positive conclusion, and that is when it came to the story of the sages translating to Greek for Talmud Melech, not only did it not lead to a negative consequence, but on the other hand, we find that Yavanis, the Greek, actually gets singled out for being the proper language and an important language for translating the Torah into. And the same thing is regarding the story of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Not only did that episode of Beis Hillel not having the halacha follow him not lead to future situations where the halacha might be followed like Beis Shammai. On the contrary, we find that by Beis Hillel being a nasi, but also someone who's an anvasan, someone who was a humble individual, and their school of thought was humble, they were able to influence Beis Shammai to have this feeling and this approach to Torah, as well as we find later on that there are various times that Beis Shammai will actually be mekel. They'll actually be the ones who are lenient. So there is a positive conclusion that came out of these two stories, and therefore initially it was only a day that was similar and hard to the making of the Egel, but not in the end. On a deeper level, we know that the Frierdiker Rebbe was the person who came to America, and he wanted that all of the Torah should be translated into all of the languages. And we have this special blessing, this blessing of knowing that translating the Torah is bringing godliness down into another level of the world and entering a new space and elevating that space. It's a positive thing. It's a commandment from Moshe Rabbeinu to that generation that entered Eretz Yisrael, but also teach one of us that we have to do whatever we can to translate Torah and to spread Torah in every place and in every language. And we know that the words of the tzaddikim, they are eternal. And Aaron HaKohen initially said, by the day of the making of the Egel, Ki Chag LaHashem Mocher, that tomorrow is going to be a holiday for Hashem, as that was his intent. It didn't come out to be like that, but the Arizal explains that actually Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, the day that Aaron was referring to, will actually be a holiday when Mashiach comes. And so too regarding Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, it says, is a day that's going to be with extreme simcha when Mashiach comes, and Hiratzin that these days should be transformed to joy and complete happiness with the coming of Mashiach speedily.